Magic Without Fears Hermetic podcast. I'm your host, Frater RC. For more and exclusive episodes, visit magicwithoutfears.com. Thank you for your support.
Hello, listeners. My name is Casey, and I am the host of The Cult Vault, a podcast that looks into some of history's most notorious cults. Join me as I look at cults, cult behaviour, and dive deep into the psyche of some of the heinous leaders of these movements. Listen to interviews with survivors and testimonies from those who have been affected by these sects, but live to tell their stories. If you enjoy well-researched, no-nonsense accounts, you will enjoy this podcast. Join me on all major streaming platforms at The Cult Vault. I hope to hear from you soon.
Forward. Okay. I can't believe it's you, Jason Augustus Newcomb, in the house.
I am excited to be here. I want to thank you for your patience in getting me on. This has been a long process, much longer than usual. So
I'm nothing if not patient.
This has been a crazy year already.
Yeah,
we thought
it's been about a year
year
since you were first on the podcast. Now, I know I did yours, but yeah, since last time I was in California when we talked, and that was our first crossing of paths. It's been a good year. Well, it's been a fucking weird year.
How long have you been back in Canada?
Since September equinox.
Oh, okay. So you've been back a while.
Yeah, now, well, sort of. Yeah, the time blurs together, but definitely.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think you were probably already back in Canada when we talked on my little thing.
Oh,
but,
yeah, yeah.
It all just kind of blurs together for me, because I'm not in your shoes.
Yeah, the time is both crawling and flying by at the same time.
Yeah.
It's still strange up here, but yeah, that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about grimoires and magic and practicing. So we've been diving into, though I haven't done your grimoire course yet, and people can actually, I'm going to do that now with my people, and people can join on if they still want. But what we did do with my group is dove into the Heptarchia Mystica as a grimoire, of course, and have begun exploring that. And it's a fascinating journey to really take that first step into the puritanical Enochian system, as is it's very different from the GD that I'm used to.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
but
and
the Golden Dawn never really address the Heptarchy at all. I don't think Crowley mentions it in the Equinox either.
I think I read that someone had evidence that they were aware of it. I think maybe Fuller mentioned something about them being aware of it due to some references and some diaries he has. But yeah, they definitely didn't do anything with it, really. Yeah.
They were working off of the Rudd materials, right? They were working off of that sort of secondary
Book H. In Book H.
Yeah.
Yeah, which no one knows. No one knows who compiled it, though. Book H is sort of a mystery, and it replaces, names from the Great Cross with the Tablet of Union, which is like the Tablet of Union. I think is sort of the Golden Dawn version of the Ring and Laman.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, the Tablet of Union. I mean, it sits there in the the Great Table, but it's not really mentioned. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be any sign that it is anything other than just sort of there, and it's sort of invented by the Liber H, I think. So
yeah, Book H. So yeah, but of course the names on the tablets are used a lot in the GD system.
Right.
Yeah, we draw from them across and down as well. But yeah, no. So exploring, transitioning into looking at the Purist system, it's been an education, and we've been working with the Heptarchial Kings. So one of the things that is fascinating about that is that not only that it's a system of planetary magic, but that one of the spirits is actually, two of the spirits each actually take the role of three, or actually are two of them, right? And they rule over, right? Karmara and Hagenal rule as king of kings and prince of princes, and can direct any of the ones on any day at any hour, despite their planetary associations.
Right. And I think one of the reasons why it probably didn't end up getting used by those sort of in between people up until the 20th century is that it is a bit murky as to exactly what all of that means. It's not laid out as clearly as some other stuff. And honestly, none of Dee's stuff is really laid out all that clearly. It's really the you know you're kind of diving in and either following the Golden Dawn way of looking at it, or you're just sort of wading into the deep waters. I mean, frankly, the Golden Dawn stuff really makes everything within the Watchtower system make a little bit more sense, because at least there's a sort of a reason why you would choose one of the iterations of a name or the other, because of the elemental aspect of it. But with the way that, if you look at it from a pure perspective, there's really no way of discerning why you would conjure really any angel other than just the quadrants themselves. And even then, why would you use one direction over another? Because your patient is in that direction, or like what would be the reasoning if you're just going with directionally and not elementally? It just suddenly the system there doesn't seem to be really a reason for there to be so much of it there. It seems like you could pare it down to like 8 entities and then you'd be done, or maybe 16. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not sure how I'm gonna feel once I've moved through the Heptarchy and onto the watchtowers and the traditionalist approach there. I'm not sure how that's gonna suit me. And if it doesn't really suit me, I won't necessarily invest too much time in it and just stick with the elemental distribution in the GD system. But I definitely want to check it out and see what that magic is like. I'm loath to swap 2 watchtowers directions. Like,
sure.
Imordial Hectega will always be my Earth, but it's just so hard. But I'm willing to go there when I get there. Right now, I'm just really loving the heptarchial stuff, and I did Bonorum angel work back in the Inner Order 20 years ago, but it was stuff that it was really fabulously mixed together with regular ritual work connected with the city of Jerusalem and the 14 stations of the cross, aimed at creating talismans that we then even flew adepts to Jerusalem to place those talismans around Jerusalem in the early 2000s. So this was
Wow.
the kind of yearly annual working our Inner Order would do, is we'd create these rituals using a mixture of, say, the vault or this system of magic, or the Enochian with the 14 stations. And then 1 year we did working, and every adept around the world would do the working. Then we'd get at day C we'd get together and all do the major consecrations of the talismans based on our all repetitive working of that. And then some people who would be, well, they'd be identified by the Third Order and chosen by them to send them to 3 years I was there. So Jerusalem, Calcutta, and Strasbourg. Yeah. And I got to go to the Strasbourg one, but I wasn't chosen for the other ones. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds really fascinating and interesting work.
If you're going to be in a magical group, you should do cool stuff, right?
I mean, yeah, that was always my fantasy, but the magical groups I was involved in didn't go on, world tours. So at least not for magical purposes. So
well, you're doing other fabulous things, so we're all called to different stuff, eh?
Sure. No,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think what you do, what you create for the magical world, for the world, is just as fabulous as any of that.
Well, I mean, maybe. I don't know.
You're too busy doing it to pay attention.
I'm curious. What when you say that you're working with it from a traditionalist perspective, in order to be working with it, there's a few little sort of gaps and holes that need to be filled in. What's the material that you're using as your guidebook through that as a grimoire?
Well, you pretty quickly after, there's not actually that much practical literature out there, right? There's you and Stenwick and Leach and James and obviously Skinner for the things he does, and Yehida has a cool book, but
I've never read that.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, it's awesome because he's sort of a GD guy, but also from that I think it's Benjamin Rowe, who was an independent sort of Enochian magician who came up with
Right.
some interesting
Yeah.
stuff. So he's from I don't know if he was trained with that group in Dublin or he's from that school, but he like in his book he's got a whole section on just scrying or pathworking each of the Enochian letters using even I think one of the calls and some other hardcore stuff. But then he puts his whole diary entries describing the visions he even saw on those things, and there's some interesting stuff. And he does comparative things of how to open Enochian working with the, as he would see, the Rigardi method versus the D. Pierce method. And then he walks you through his entire book of invocations for the 19-day initiation in the D. Pierce style that he wrote, and a bunch of other stuff.
So what? You're looking at all of those sources then, and kind of putting together your
Yeah,
own
I've
perspective.
I've definitely read them all. And what I've outlined for us to sort of gently get people into this, like, one thing like the Enochian masterclass was really great for introducing Aaron Leach and Stenwick's perspective, and then very well balanced with your own, of course, because you and I are quite similar in our approaches as we fuse things, it seems to me. Whereas Leach and Stenwick are a bit more polarized in their views. But as a result, my approach isn't to try and like find the right way to do things. My approach is to try them all. And that's what I have my people doing. Like right now, we just did a operation with Stenwick sigil, but Stenwick did the Enochian left to right, and I was like, why'd you do that? And he said, well, because it works. And I think that's fine. And I'm like, cool. Now we're going to try it ourselves, though. Now that we've tried it like that, we're going to reverse the letters and try it that way. And then do a full painted one. The first operation we were trying to get, we're sussing out the colors. Do you have any sense of what the colors you would paint? Because they would all make sense what colors you'd use for the planetary ones associated with days. But for a sigil that's just Karmara and Hagenol that would govern all of the days, would you use the colors associated with them in their planetary attributions in either of the 4 stations? Or would you
No,
have something higher, right?
I mean, I tend to go honestly to monochrome with those sorts of things. That
Yeah,
tends to be my instinct.
you can't really go wrong with white and black.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so we all did an operation to, and it's shocking what common answers we got so far. You know,
You mean
so
you're all working remotely from one another, and you're all
yeah,
getting sort of
we're doing some cyber magic stuff as to fuel our personal work and exploring the same things, and that's what we do in our magical working group. And
cool.
yeah, it's been really exciting, and we're just trucking along. We're also going to take some time this month to explore Tatwas. I got a cool guest teacher from Yeshi's order going to pop in and give us some new methods he's developed over the years. And
For doing
for
Tatwa
Tatwas,
visions, or
yeah,
just discussing, because I mean Tatwas is a complicated subject. It's
it is.
obviously it's related to the Golden Dawn in a fairly intimate way, largely I think because of the the modern writings. I don't even know how much it would have been really a part of what they were doing back at that time.
It was a huge part of the original Golden Dawn. Yeats used them so much he carried them around in his pocket and would just try them, like put people he knew through different workings.
Right, but I mean that's Yeats.
Yes, that's Yeats. Yeah, how often were they all doing Tatwa work? Who knows?
And like it was a significant thing. It was something that was going on. It was being discussed in theosophy, and that's probably how it sort of filtered into Golden Dawn. But it seemed like there was a lot of just like with any kind of magical group today, there were a lot of like strong personalities that had their own kind of like agenda, and it seems like the Eastern stuff all comes in through a couple of people. I can't remember their names, but they seem like they're sort of strongly connected with theosophy. So, like, I mean, was that central to the order, or was that just something that some strong personalities were putting forward, and it sort of got pushed through into the modern era because of that? I mean, it seems like it's out of step with other than the fact that it's elemental, and the idea of the sub elemental tatwas. I've never even, I mean, I'm not like a huge scholar of tantra and yoga, but I've read quite a bit, and I've never encountered them talking about sub-tattvas anywhere. It's just the tattvas. So I mean, that seems to be very sort of theosophical or Golden Dawnish, but the and you know, I mean, obviously that's an interesting addition to it.
Yeah, the teaching has a lot of teachings on that stuff,
and it filters into the Enochian of the Golden Dawn as well, right?
because
I mean,
of the sub-elemental quadrants.
right.
Yeah.
But again, as we were just saying a minute ago, that like the deep purists look at it at that all that gets flushed down the toilet, right?
Yes, it does.
not a bit of that makes any sense anymore if you get rid of the elemental aspect of the tablets.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So the two interesting differences between the Stenwickian and Leachian approach to the Heptarchia is Stenwick puts the king, prince, and ministers all on one sigil and stands on it, as Dee would have us do. And Leach has the prince on the table, the king in hand, and the ministers under the feet. And what I noted, so by, you know, that's where I was like, okay, now I need to go to the manuscripts, and looking at those, it's quite clear that actually Dee does have a sigil on the table, but it says nothing of, I believe, of one in the hand. So it's like even splitting the difference. It looks like maybe
right.
is standing on the ministers and has, you know, the king and the prince on the table. Yeah, like sort of like
there's definitely a standing on. I remember that.
Oh yeah, that's
quite clearly.
That's one of the most
clearly
cool, interesting parts about this whole system. It's what made me so keen. I'm like, oh, let's definitely try a system of planetary magic that involves drawing awesome sigils and, you know, standing on them. Like, so I've got my you know, my canvas all spread in a circle, and I'm painting on my sigil, and it's great. And then, yeah, and the other traditional part of it is, you know, rather than doing like I would often do an SIRP or a watchtower to initiate Enochian work. Instead, you know, you've got the prayer of Enoch repeated 3 times, then the heptarchial oration, and then conjurations for the king and prince.
Right. And do you feel like you can't do a more Golden Dawnish opening and still be doing I'm just curious, because it seems like to me that those things aren't really completely out of step with one another. It's not like
they're both good, in my opinion. We're doing a mixture of stuff, and we're experimenting. You know, people do what they want, but definitely I encourage people to explore and compare and contrast. Like Stenwick has some very interesting theories. He believes the best way to create the right kinds of energy field around you is by combining the LBRP with the LIRH.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, you know, people come up with different things through experimenting, and that's definitely the main thing to encourage, I think, especially when teaching a new system to people.
Well, one of the things that I mean, you know, obviously this is just my opinion, but it's based somewhat on observation, and that is that it seems, and I actually may have even mentioned this to you in one of our previous conversations. It seems to me that a lot of magicians go down a path of beginning with fairly simple things and ending up with very complex things, and feeling that the very complex thing is the key to it all. And yet, what it seems to me that if you took away all of the ritual stuff that's going on and just look at what's actually happening with that magician, they're improving their ability to sort of tune into the spirit world, and to tune into the energies of the various, you know, things that are going on, and like with, you know, utilizing the divine face of the Heptarchian system as opposed to the divine face of the, say, the Arbitel system or something like that. Those are two different feeling things, and it's not. And I wonder if like the procedural differences are making a difference, or if it's really just the familiarity with the material that's making a difference. I know that there's you know, there's missteps that can be made, you know, if you start combining, you know, completely unrelated things with one another, then you can start to cause damage. But as long as you're sort of staying within a symbol set and staying within a, you know, a magical milieu, so to speak, it seems like the procedure becomes less relevant than just the experience of the practitioner. That's just my
Yeah.
observation for my own self, and then the people who, I mean, like, obviously I only have exposure to, I probably have exposure to less people than you do, since you have like active working groups, and you've been involved in orders that are spread over wide geographical areas. So you probably have a much clearer perspective on what I'm talking about than I do. But within my limited perspective, it seems like the improvements that people make magically aren't by improving their procedures, but by improving themselves and their themselves as vehicles for any procedure.
It's something we talk about a lot. It's a very interesting debate. I just read John King's Imperial Arts, and he would definitely represent the opposing view to that. He's
Yeah.
someone who believes that visualization is nonsense and a waste of our time, and he would definitely come down on the procedure makes perfect side rather than your special connectivity. Though he also does believe you have to be sort of specially selected to be able to do this. So there's definitely a range of opinion in the reputable occult world, I suppose.
Well, I don't know if I'm part of the reputable occult world.
Well, I don't even, yeah, I know I say that word because I don't know what other words to say, the something occult world. Yeah, anyway, but yeah, I'm definitely more along your lines of the interpreting it as sort of a qualitative connection that increases, or quantitatively is developed by doing frequently more and more work. And yeah, it's interesting.
Have you had a chance to interview King at all?
No.
I heard him on one of the like podcasts that has a pretty large listenership. And when he was actually speaking, he sounded to be much more I
Chilled
don't
than
want
in
to
his
say,
books.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was my impression. But I mean, he just wrote a new book, and I haven't read the whole thing, but I read through a bit of it, and it seems like it's still on that same wavelength of, yeah, you gotta do the procedure right, and it doesn't matter what you're thinking you're doing, and just do the procedure and it will take care of itself. As if magic is a technology similar to electronics or something. Which, I mean, maybe it is, I don't know, in which case I'm a poor electrician, or I was.
Yeah, no,
And
I think that approach is just as is definitely myopic, because it's just part of this trend to take the thing that you're into and say this is also the limits of what is and what can be, and just discount everything else. And it's sort of lazy, I think, to
well,
see
it
reality that
sounds like
way.
our whole it actually sounds like our whole civilization, though, doesn't it? I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
That seems to be
absolutely.
the trend everywhere. It's not just in magic, it's in everything, from cooking to politics.
Yeah, I just don't like, yeah, you can't, I don't think there's even a leg to stand on to argue that imagination and visualization are meaningless human qualities, essentially. Yeah,
Well, to me, it's actually I think it's actually a byproduct of the scientific revolution, because and the Cartesian, I think, separation of consciousness and matter. um Before that time period, people just didn't have that sense. There wasn't that duality between the two things. So when you said you dreamed something, it didn't say, well, you didn't have to then say, well, is that a real dream, or is that one of those fake dreams that's just in your head? Was
yeah,
that the divine speaking to you through a dream, or was that just in, I mean, there wasn't that sense that even was a thing. So your inner consciousness and outer world, they're all an interconnected whole, up until sort of uh, the scientific revolution that people like to call Newtonian, but that seems very unfair considering that he was an alchemist. So probably didn't have that perspective himself. So but previous to that point, we didn't have this argument about these silly things, like, are you a psychological magician? What does that even mean?
yeah,
Yes, I study
yeah.
my soul.
No, that all that sort of dualistic thinking, I think, is a bunch of nonsense, especially the psychological spirit model, because the idea that your brain, or however the mind and consciousness works, is separate from whatever the spirit realm is so crazy, because we don't even yet know what consciousness or the mind or even matter is. And to
Right.
say that, put that in opposition to the spirit land or the spirit matter or spirit realm, like how on earth could you think these two unknown things are oppositionally different? Much more likely they're two experiences of a greater whole,
Right.
that we can't comprehend.
And even just getting simpler, if you say that anything that happens in your consciousness, in your imagination, or in your in your mind is not a real thing, or not a magically applicable thing, that gets rid of like most biblical prophecy. It gets rid of the whole of shamanism. I mean, it just throws so much of the mystical and magical world in the toilet, that it doesn't. I mean, like, why are you even having that argument? You're arguing against your own experiences. If you're talking to demons, those demons are not in the room in a palpable way, that in the same way that your friend Fred is. They just aren't. They're no matter how present they are energetically, they are an experience in consciousness. And quite a few people who I've interviewed have said, well, I think someone might be able to detect that they were in the room. I mean, show me that. It's not like I've had plenty of shared visionary experiences, similar to what you were talking about with the entity speaking similar things to you guys.
Hmm.
I've had things like that happen. I've had experiences where people are in the room having the same vision at the same time. So I mean, I'm not discounting the spirit world as something that's real. I'm just saying it's not separate from consciousness. It's silly to try and make that cut. There's no reason for
Yeah.
it. It takes away. Interestingly enough, and I don't want to start losing guests as a result of me sort of talking crap about the people who I've interviewed, but the people who have that view often seem to be the people who also say, well, no, I never see visions whatsoever.
Yeah, well, that actually, I was gonna say, yeah, a lot of them, they tend to all could be confessedly poor scryers, which
Right.
always makes me laugh. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, but
Maybe if you weren't completely closed to that part of your consciousness, you just suddenly find that you're a good scryer.
but King describes seeing these demons physically in the triangle
Yeah, and I
and
don't I
filling
don't
up
think
the
that
whole room.
I don't know that King would say that spirits aren't a part of consciousness either in his books or in his he just would say that they aren't in our minds, which are two
Yeah,
different things.
yeah, yeah. No, I think psychology has to be understood in its proper place, but to discount it or to give it too much credit is a mistake and over compensation.
Well, and I think that the mistake was really made by Aleister Crowley, and I know that he's like a big punching bag for everybody's stuff these days. But I mean, he wrote in several places things that he was trying to be cool. He'd been reading Jung, and trying to like sound like he was modern and scientific about stuff. And he ended up saying some stuff that I really don't think would I doubt that he would want to stand behind. Like
Yeah, at
100
one
years
point
later.
he claimed that it was all psychological, and then he reversed himself later on towards the end of his life and said
Right.
it's all real. Whatever those words mean, I just think the whole debate about each of those definitions is silly.
It is.
We're not there yet. We're like still we're not there in our science. And so of course we're just all we can do is investigate these things spiritually, and and science will truck along behind at its own rate. And
Speaking of science,
yeah,
well, one of the things I think is really interesting is how many skeptics in the last 20 years or so have had to say that, like, by any other measure of scientific exploration, psychic powers have been definitively proven to exist. But because it's psychic powers, we refuse to believe it. I mean, it's like there have to be at least 5 that I've seen who've basically said those words in writing or in speech, and it's just so preposterous. It's like, well, I mean, what if, I mean, that's what they said about Galileo, you know, like, you know, like the, you're just being the people who don't believe in things for the sake of not believing them, because they don't want to have to change their models.
Well, dude, they said that about UFOs, right?
I mean, I still don't know what the current are we believing in UFOs now? I'm not sure what I've seen headlines about it, but I haven't ever
Well,
read
there's
any articles.
definitely UFOs. They've a lot, like, or UAPs.
I mean,
now.
I've seen UFOs. I don't know what they are. Whether
Yeah,
they
oh,
could
really?
be.
When did you see them?
Oh, I've seen them a couple times with my wife.
Wow. Yeah, that's what we're discovering, is that there's like tons more than we thought, and everyone's like, a lot of people are like, yeah, we told you so, and the rest was like, oh shit, what the fuck. I guess we believe in UFOs now. Well, we know that they are a thing. What they are, we don't know.
Right. I mean, I guess yeah. What I mean by that is, are we believing that they're alien life forms contacting us, or just something, I mean, the experiences I had were both sort of distant flying objects, one of which was just way too fast moving, but like the my wife and I were both sort of staring up at the sky, looking through a moonroof in her car, and this thing just like zipped by, and it was too high to be. I mean, it was just it was an unexplainable object. It moved too quickly, and it moved too weirdly for it to be any. It was not a plane, because it moved way too fast, and the lighting, the color of it was this weird sort of amber color that you just don't see on airplanes at all. So and it moved really fast. We both, like, without even speaking to each other, just both jumped out of the car, and it was gone by the time we got out. But it wasn't a meteorite either, because it was slower than that,
Yeah.
faster than a plane. So
wow, I would love to see something like that sometime. That would be awesome.
but the second was even more impressive. It was actually multiple objects, and they were flying all around each other, and they stayed long enough that I literally thought that we were going to hear on the radio, it's finally happened.
Yeah.
Alien life forms have revealed themselves. But then they just flew off, and that was it. But yeah, I mean, I have no idea what those were. And there might even be a rational explanation for them. So
well, there was
I
one
tend
that
to be
was like the size of a city that floated over like New York or Chicago or someplace like that was reported by hundreds of people.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about stuff like that once or twice a year.
Because they don't want to talk about it, like the psychics, right? Like they don't want to talk about the fact that remote viewing works.
Right.
They don't want enemies developing it and using it. They don't want the people who are really like spot on, naturally good at it, to realize it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've done a couple of remote viewing groups, and I can definitively say that it does work, and that you can receive information. But I've never worked with a person, and maybe I just haven't been lucky enough to find one that that was right even more than 50 or 60% of the time on enough of the information for it to be valuable. So yeah. I mean, I think the challenge with that sort of a thing is we really haven't, in the same way we don't even know what consciousness is. We really haven't developed that concept well enough for it to be particularly tactically useful. I mean, you can definitely get impressions of other places, and you can definitely get, like, when, particularly the after effect of when you're receiving information and then you find out what it is. You're, so often you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that is exactly what I totally get what those impressions were trying to lead me towards.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you were trying to like find out if there was a bomb in an enemy installation or something, it would be rather hard to put that to practice.
Yeah, Yeah. Well,
I did a group where we were trying to foresee the future because, um, you know, according to at least one theoretical physicist who's also interested in this sort of stuff, um, there's really no reason why that sort of information would be linked to a forward time. So, and there's also tons of evidence of precognition as well. Um, so we did a bunch of stuff, and you know again, it was more than half the time. I think we had like a 70% accuracy, but like, I mean, you can't really, that wouldn't, in the real world, that
yeah.
that doesn't.
Yeah, it's useful to a point, maybe. Anyway, still very interesting. Something I hope we explore and understand. I mean, I think that magic really is us exploring these things that seem to work, right?
Yeah.
And we have just different understandings, and people have different points of view as to why it works, whether it's through visualization and development and will, or whether it's through formulas or some tradition or connection to what is really real. But either way, we're still fumbling around with the same formulas, ceremonies, invocations, and spells in some form or the other, because they seem to work, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Some things seem to work better than others, and that's what we're doing. That's sort of the development of magic, as I see it, is we're still moving forward, just putting things together in different ways, getting new things, because some stuff, Enochian magic's relatively recent. Yeah, and that's the
Well, the thing about Enochian that's kind of interesting is that I don't think Dee or Kelly would really have wanted it to be called magic, because first of all, that was pretty much, it's been a pejorative word basically since at least ancient Greece. I mean, not the word, but the conceptual chunk of behavior that we call magic. Obviously, the word has changed as language has changed, but this idea of doing an operation that is sort of selfish in any way, that's kind of against the natural order of things in order to try and make something happen that you're choosing to make, that's always been considered to be sort of forbidden, and not um, uh, something that Dee or Kelly would really want to be involved in. But at the same time, there's always been people wanting to work magic, and by any real definition of from as an outsider looking in, it's clear that they were doing magic. But they wouldn't
yeah.
have, they wouldn't have called it that. And I think that one of the things that you're discovering as you're trying to do it sort of quote unquote by the book is that what they were doing really doesn't resemble our way of doing magic all that much at all, or even
No.
they were basically, they were praying
Yeah,
and then waiting for an entity to speak to them.
exactly. It's interesting. I mean, when you think that of Franz Barden, he famously sort of thought of magic, or what we call magic, as like true religion in a sense. He often, I think, refers to it as true religion. What we're doing, this Hermetic stuff that
Yeah.
he presented so interestingly and fascinatingly. And then, like, I think it was even John King on Glitchbottle, or maybe it was Frater, who was highlighting the fact that the original word magic was Persian, and it was used against Persians to basically denigrate their practices and faith. Oh, that's magia,
Right.
that's magic. And I think it was King actually who might have said, like, basically magic was what you called other people's religion. And if you think of Franz Barden's idea that this magic that we do is true religion, then really, yeah, this is just our religion, maybe, and magic is this pejorative term that we've sort of proudly self-adopted at this point in time.
Well, I mean, we've done it with witches, vampires. There's just a ton of words that were once considered to be something that you wouldn't want to be called, that people proudly sort of walk around with the title these days. The thing about the thing about magic, which obviously we're stuck with the word now. I mean, you can use the word sorcery and you can use the word theurgy to sort of separate them from one another, and I think that that's a somewhat valuable way of approaching things. Although sorcery itself, I mean, that's that word has also been used a lot by stage magic. So, and fairy tale magic. So it's a word that's sort of loaded in its own way too. But if you read academic books on the study of ancient magical practices, almost every single one spends at least 20 pages at the beginning trying to define what magic is, because it's such an odd concept, because people do all kinds of things. People do rituals for all kinds of reasons, particularly in the past when medicine was often sort of mixed with various sort of ritual and talismanic things. I mean, all the way up until the pretty late in our history, that has been the case. So something that looks quite a lot like magic can really just be the act of a doctor, and same with a priest, or a clergy person. They do things that look a lot like magic as well, but those aren't considered to be the bad kind of magic. Which the funny thing about modern occultists is that they often are really more religious than they are magical. I mean, I think that what the bad magic that I mean, it's obviously a silly idea, but when people are casting spells on people to try and manipulate them or hurt them, or people are trying to force spirits to bring them money or something like that, those are sorts of things that are frowned upon by society. And I don't know whether there was really a reason to feel that way, but I mean, I guess because like if you're born rich, you have certain advantages that you get to just sort of have, and if you're born beautiful, you have certain advantages that other people don't have. So I mean, it seems like there's really no difference between that and crushing some herbs over a candle and saying some incantations. That doesn't seem to be any more unfair than than the people who are born with all kinds of privileges in their lives that just get to do what they want without having to try harder. But that's the problem with those sorts of behaviors, the ones that our ancestors would have called bad magic, is that they don't really bring you inherently toward a greater understanding of yourself or the universe. They're just trying to manipulate the universe for your own ego benefit in some way or another. So and there's no way of parsing that. That's just that's just the fact. However, those sorts of things can serve the purpose of like if you do a healing spell on yourself, you can live longer so that you can find your enlightenment down the road. And same with money, and love brings you joy, and that brings you closer to the divine. I mean, you can there's a reason to do anything, but inherently those actions tend to draw you more towards selfishness.
Yeah, I think that can be the case. You and we have this divide between the very sort of eager thaumaturgists and theurgists, right? Those who are focused on self-transformation and theosis, and those who are interested in wonder working, whether it's to gain riches or bring health or healing or hurt to other people. And yeah, some of them discard one or the other, though I think really the whole point of the path of the initiate is to use the ability to work wonders in harmony with that sense of true will and being in alignment with the true self, so that what wonders you are working on in the world are in alignment with your highest self and your the highest divine will that you can draw from. but not everyone sees it that way. And I've had a lot of conversations with people that definitely don't see it that way. And they think all of the theurgy or self-development or spiritual mystical journey is complete nonsense and a waste of time, and magic is magic and has nothing to do with anything else. And they just are about creating changes in this world and manipulating nature. It's a big divide. It's very fascinating.
Interestingly, Rufus Opus, actually, when I was talking to him, he had an interesting take on it, which is that in his perspective, even if you're doing sort of selfish things with your magic, because of the fact that you're making contact with the spirit world, you're inherently growing on some level. I thought that was an interesting idea. I don't know that in
Oh
practice,
yeah. Yeah, dude,
what,
that's such a huge idea in the Golden Dawn. I mean, that's why we do all these god form works all the time, and we consider every elemental we create in ceremony, and all the way up through every ritual we do is having a theurgic or a divinizing effect upon our nature, just because we are
yes, but
engaging in the spirit world. For sure, every work is holy, and that's where you get full circle back around to the religion, right? And that at
right.
that point of theurgical, sort of like inner initiate stage, you're not even doing the magic because you're attached to some sort of desired outcome, but because the act of doing the work is so holy and it's sacrificed to the Lord, right? And the fact that something might manifest in alignment with your true will is a side effect of the holiness of going up that middle pillar, rather than craving the powers of the black and the white pillars.
Sure, and I think that's one of the positive outcomes of the 19th century occult revival, is that idea of an initiatory cycle in which you grow as a being, you know, really grew out of that, possibly partially out of Freemasonry,
Yeah.
and obviously the ancient mysteries, and looking back at that, played a part in it as well. But first of all, I don't know that, and I can't speak to your experience, because you have it seems like from our previous conversations you've had a really good experience with your particular Golden Dawn group, and greater network that you've been involved in. But I know personally from people who come to me that a lot of people have been less than thrilled with various other versions of the Golden Dawn system, and those initiatory sorts of orders in general. And of course there's an obvious problem that comes in, which is hard to deal with. But I mean, the people, when you invite a person, a person comes to you and they say, I want to join your group, you sort of look at them twice and you go, oh, is this person going to be a positive member, or are they going to be a negative member, right? And the ones who seem like they're not going to be the best match, you figure out a way of making them not join, and the ones that seem like they're going to be great, you bring in wholeheartedly, right? But it's pretty easy to make a mistake in that. Even a very wise person cannot recognize that someone's going to have an ego overload rather than a growth within an organization like that. And so as soon as you have people who are not so great, who take on leadership positions in organizations, then you start having things like people getting emotionally abused or sexually abused within an organization. And this isn't just with the Golden Dawn. I mean, this is a huge problem in Eastern religion stuff quite a lot. Yogi gurus have been really horrible to people in the 20th century, and it's just, we don't really have a way of being sure that the person who we're going to get initiated by, or the person who we're going to be initiating, is who they claim to be. Because I mean, you and I are both human, and we know we're not perfect in ways, and so, like, I think, having known you for a while now, I think that you've got a really good heart, and I'm going to venture to say that I have a good heart too. And what that makes me do, because I've been in a leadership position in an occult group too, is I try and see the best in people all the time. Like, so I will often let a person in who's probably too damaged to really get much benefit out of the group. because I feel for them, and I hope the best for them, and that they're going to, you know, rise to the occasion rather than what my little gut instinct says they probably won't. Um, and most of the time, those people just sort of crash and burn. But I've definitely seen some people with serious problems grow to be in pretty high leadership positions in organizations. I don't know if you have. I guess you probably have,
Yeah,
because you.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I've had to deal with it directly for years. You know,
So and that's the challenge in an initiatory experience. You're obviously you're just playing a role to a certain extent, but you also are the sort of the spiritual holder. So if there's a lot of cancer in there, it just doesn't, it really hurts that process.
it's definitely why we have such strict rules in the Golden Dawn about having multiple adepts to run a temple. You can't just have one person there; their ego can't take it. They just can't. You have to have multiple people, and that requires dialogue and discourse. And if you have good people, you can build a really awesome temple. Like Temple Tahuti in Vancouver was founded in the early mid 90s by Nineveh Shadrach, who was trained down in LA by Ramses and Zinc and the other people who founded that order. And he brought a lot with him to founding of the sanctuary and then Temple Tahuti, and trained up other good adepti and created a really powerful magical environment of really eager people who were like giving their all to building the best temple they could with the most beautiful everything and all the tools and good classes, and they kept growing and improving my entire experience there, right up until eventually, yeah, until I closed the temple, and we built it bigger and bigger and more active, and people would naturally, you'd think that people that weren't really definitely meant for leadership roles, like generally they were pretty easy to identify, and they could always just still go through the grades. They can go through the outer order and graduate the system. It's a self-contained system that you finish, and then if you want to show up to initiations or monthly events, that's cool, but you finished the system. There's nowhere
Right.
now. It's on you now, right? That's a really good thing, because we get to know you over that length of time. And if you're not suited for this particular inner order, you might be suited for another, or you can just live your life, do whatever you want. You can still come to things, as long as if you're a dick and you misbehave, you will get expelled. Like, you can't grab people's asses or badmouth people or say nasty, be rude. And there's a high standard of behavior most of the time, and I definitely had to deal with that a bunch. I had to expel people every once in a while, or at least have talks with them. Usually you can work with people. It's like we're human beings, like you were saying, right? So it's not like all these just hard and black and white rules and hard and fast. Like, people aren't dicks. Usually you can work with people and help people get through things, especially in a magical environment. You can give people regiments of work. I was given crazy regiments of work that would blow people's minds. That would last 6 months, 18 months, 2 years. Like, I was held in Portal for 18 months during my whole, knowledge and conversation Abramelin period, and that was a long time, and I was given extremely rigorous work to do to combat the powerful egoic forces coming at you through Tahuti and the powerful workings you're doing, and just the current of having gone through all of those grades, and you're in spirit getting ready for the sun. It's a massively powerful time. So you need to temper it. It's like, hey, sweep and mop 3,000 square feet every day for a year. That sort of stuff helps. That kind of environment of support and helping people grow really does have an effect, and created, like, it's why most people who go through the orders that I know, they still like had great experiences with amazing people that last forever. And usually
So
bad people get spit out because they're lazy and don't want to do shit. But once in a while, you have a really bad person, like sociopath level, who does ascend and does get power because they're playing a game. They're not just
right.
sort of a dick who's not cut out for leadership in this kind of demanding environment. They're like actually, scary up there. And
Or they have some sort of pathological problem where they're like they want approval, and so they work really hard, but it's all for this weird not. I mean, anyway, I don't want to talk crap about other people
yeah,
too
well,
much, but
so Tahuti produced, like, 7, 8 adepts over its decade plus, or decade of time. And yeah, 2 of them went off and are got to be the only people in charge, and they keep trying to take power from other people in the occult world, and they just got to be these supremely honored grand poobahs, and that's the way they like it. And so, those people are there. And for us, it was 2 out of the hundreds of members that went through our temple, and of the 7-8 adepts that were made by it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the greater problem in occult groups is not so much that people aspire to be awful, but just that they aspire to be so little that there's actually more sort of boringness in the occult groups that I've been involved with no aspersions meant upon any of my friends, even those of them who are boring, but that they're the idea of actually sort of rising to any great level, either personally or within an organization, really was outside of what they wanted, and they just sort of wanted to vegetate in the place or whatever, take advantage of it, look for girls or whatever. It seemed like that. And even within my own teaching, very often, because one of the things that I kind of emphasize is setting goals for oneself, not just magical goals, but goals in life. And it seems like a lot of people don't really want to set very interesting goals for themselves, and it seems strange. If you have all the if anything is possible in your life, and you can you can accomplish exactly what you want, why would you just choose to have a slight pay raise or something like that? Like why but I mean, that's where a lot of people's heads are at, and I don't want to insult them, because I mean, obviously, if everybody is a bunch of jungle cat kings, then we are all going to end up tearing each other apart, to a certain extent. There's only so much. I mean, how many adepts can the world really handle?
Well, as an Aquarius looking into the Aquarian age, I'd like to imagine all the people living life in peace,
Hey, no,
just
I'd love that.
like
But the
we
thing
could
is,
achieve a higher level of spirituality, and I think it will happen in the long term, but I'm a little pessimistic in the short term.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is we aren't really set up for it culturally.
No, we have a long ways to go. I think a really long ways to go, like hundreds of years.
I mean,
That's
I
not-
actually think it could happen within our lifetime, but I don't. But it would require a weight of consciousness shift that I think in my youth I was misperceiving. Because I think unfortunately, rather than like a lot of the people who I would have thought, oh, they're really on the enlightenment wavelength, actually just they're doing something. Everyone's gone either too far to the right or too far to the left, to the point where they're no longer really functioning in a healthy way towards other people.
Yeah. Well, the middle pillar is not trendy right now.
And I don't understand how that happened. It felt it almost feels like it was pulled out from under me, and so I've become more cynical as I've gotten older, because I was so hopeful that we were really moving in this wonderful direction, and I've just watched things in all, and I'm thinking mostly of magical culture, but the greater culture as well. I've watched things really shift in these really weird ways that I just like I thought we were talking about freedom. I thought we were talking about love, like no, you must obey. And that's on both sides of the political aisle. It's everywhere. Everyone's super into controlling each other and telling people what the right behavior is, whether in one direction or another, and it seems really strange to me. But anyway,
Yeah, no.
within the broader view of occultism, the idea of initiatory orders, if it existed at all, was pretty small in comparison to what was going on for the most part. I mean, magic has really, mostly been what I termed earlier the bad magic. It's been a profession through most of its existence, and it's a profession that's sort of in the on the outskirts of town. You go and do some magic with somebody, and that sort of persona has largely become the psychic parlor denizens. where, and I've worked in one of those, and nice folks a lot of the times, and people who go there, they have a specific need. They want to either have some decision that they've made confirmed, or they're not sure what decision to make and they're looking for some advice, or they have some suspicion and they want it confirmed, or they want to do something about something. They want to have some sort of magic done, and that's really where magic has been most of the time, is in that, and the idea of these initiatory orders. I mean, obviously it started with the Rosicrucians to a large extent, into our era. There were sort of mystery traditions that people were getting initiated in long before that, and then a few sort of heretical religious sects that I guess you'd get initiated into, but I don't know how much magic they were doing. But this kind of combination
in the
of
early
magic.
Christian churches, there was tons of initiations and magic going on for the first hundreds of years of Christianity.
I mean, for sure, there, and the Christianity was viewed as sort of a on the edge of town,
Yeah.
sketchy,
they were
to get involved in.
kooky magical cult of blood drinkers.
Right. Well, the weird thing about there's this legend, and it seems like it's told about everybody from tantrics to Christians to Satanists, and that's that they get together and they all have sex with each other, the men, women, boys, girls, paying no attention to their familial relationships with each other outside of there. And if any child is produced by it, then that child is sacrificed and eaten by the community. That is like a worldwide accusation, and early Christians were.
It sounds like polemics.
What's that?
It sounds like polemics, like what you write about the people you think are bad.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's so like that story with exactly those words is worldwide.
Yeah, that's gross. That's crazy. So we all say the same shit when we don't like someone.
Right. They're eating their babies.
They're a cunt.
So and in certain parts of it, obviously, you touch upon practices that people actually do.
Yeah, and hey, I just had a thought. Like, so another piece of the magic into spiritual development thing, I think a big chunk of that must have come in with the inclusion and incorporation of Kabbalah in the 16th century into like the alchemy, the budding Rosicrucian, proto-Rosicrucianisms.
Absolutely.
And so the Kabbalah coming in with the Hecalot and the Merkava practices of going astral traveling or spiritually pathworking, venturing down into these mansions under below you, or riding the chariot into the heavens. Like, that's our pathworking essentially now. And it's definitely got to have played a major role in influencing as those traditions fused and were studied together, because the Christians would study the Kabbalah because of so that's a thing.
For sure. And the thing is that I think that a lot of what you just talked about with astral traveling and speaking to spirits and even making talismans and stuff, that stuff was really a part of culture that was gutted from Europe. That was made forbidden there. But I don't think that it was quite as made forbidden in other places. So I don't think it's just Judaism. I think that the Muslims coming in also reintroduced a significant amount of that stuff back into culture. I think that the influence of India, back and forth here and there, particularly in once we get into the 18th and 19th centuries, all of that sort of stuff was, I don't want to say it was lost, but it was sort of put into the shadows so much in our culture that we didn't, I don't even think we understand the difference between magic, religion, and fantasy in our culture at all, because it's all sort of, you're obeying the rules of the group that you're a part of, or there's something wrong with you.
And
I don't mean like a magical group. I mean like your cultural group. You're very Catholic. You go to Catholic church. You go there on Sunday. You do your what is it called? It's the Catholic kids thing that they would go to.
Catechism?
No, it was like a
Sunday school?
school. The Jewish kids all had to like learn a little bit of Torah so they could get through their bar mitzvah, and that
Yeah,
you
shul.
do that, and then you forget all that, and you you just show up on the holy days, and you're fine. And what was it called? It was like CI something or other. Someone I'm sure will.
RCIA?
No, it was I can't remember.
I think you're
But
talking about catechism.
no, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I am. All I know is that a lot of the Catholic kids had to go to do something after school for a while.
Yeah.
So anyway, you do that stuff to pass the sort of cultural things, and then you just go about your life and you don't think about it anymore. Actually being super spiritual is not even really thought of at all. In our culture, you're weird if you're doing that. You become a priest or join some cult, like, like spirituality or I mean, like, stranger than spirituality is studying sort of ritual forms and trying to understand the universe from a spiritual perspective, but have a practical bent towards it. That's a really weird thing to be interested in if you think about it from like an outsider's perspective.
Some people
you-
should start making podcasts about that.
So are you familiar with Ramsey Dukes's book, Sex Secrets of the Black Magicians?
No, not exactly my kind of title.
Well, it's usually just titled SSOTBME, and it has nothing to do with that topic whatsoever. So it's actually an essay on MAGICk, and comparing it on like a compass with religion, science, art, and magic, and that each of them has their own sort of direction. And I've always thought that was an interesting perspective on things. And it does seem like people have one of those sort of directions more in their lives. Creative people, they go into their inner realms, but it's really it doesn't have to make any sense, and it's just there's no greater order that's being sought by it. Scientific people, just want to deal with the material world. Spiritual people, religious people want to sort of like follow the rules of the religion correctly, and magical people kind of want to find some sort of meaning in things
Inner
that's
mystery.
maybe not visible from the outside. But I think that like what that way of looking at it, it actually shows that a lot of people who would consider themselves part of the magical community are actually far more religious than they are magical. They're not really, and I mean, obviously it's not an exact, you have, if you're pointing one way, you can't go in the other way a little bit too, but there's a difference between the person who wants to learn how to do a magic spell to cause something to happen, and the person who wants to find their holy guardian angel and aspire to becoming, enlightened and returning to God. Those are two very different people.
Well, and that's why it's good that people like Stephen Skinner do remind us of that technical difference, because it is a technical difference for sure.
Well, but it's more than just a technical difference, because you can actually be doing the same thing but for different reasons.
Exactly.
If you can be doing exactly the same words and the same actions but have an entirely different intention behind it, and that intention is something that's in your psychology.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. These are very interesting sort of paradigms that we're exploring. I love it. You're a great person to do this with. Yeah, it's nice to shoot the shit with you, man.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else is interested in it, but
I'd say one or two.
So what I think is interesting about um, going back to the technical aspect of things, the ritual technology, is that if you look at what people have been doing for the entire time that we've been doing ritual, whether it's religious ritual, magical ritual, or even just sort of societal ritual, social rituals, uh, they're all basically the same. There's a common formula to all of it, and really all that changes is kind of who we're seeking, who or what we're seeking to connect with. So like a lot of modern sort of witchcraft folk, um, or Wicca folk, and I don't want to use that as a pejorative at all, but it tends to be more the ones that utilize the word Wicca. They're very energy focused in their magic. They want to connect with the energy of this, or feel the vibe of that. Whereas the sort of grimoireists and um, more sort of the by the bookish kind of magicians, they're looking to connect with the entity, the intelligence or whatever, and as we mentioned before, very often they aren't going to make that connection very directly because they don't really have a very visionary consciousness. So they have to bring their Wiccan friend along to be the seer while they do the rituals correctly. But ultimately, those two things aren't really different from one another at all. It's just a set of words that are being used to describe it. Entity and energy both don't really describe a spiritual being. They're just they're just sort of they're a pathway to a spiritual connection, right?
This is why it's helpful to once in a while do a bunch of DMT and remind yourself of what the spirit realms really look like. And be like,
That's
oh,
the
that's
thing.
why I can't make sense of it in my day to day. That's right. It's fucking insane. Holy
It
shit.
doesn't have anything. Yeah.
Well, it's responsive in the ways that you'd expect it to be magically, especially when you try some magical things in those realms, in my experience. So it's like, okay, yeah, this is a responsive realm. Plus, you can talk to beings, and some people have found ways to go and talk to the same beings by playing certain tones while they're going through their trip. So a frequency played in the room when they do it has helped them go back to the same exact place over and over, which is fascinating, new, very underground research some people are doing.
Again, that really connects very much with ancient theurgy, which is basically that you are,
right,
you're trying to connect with that sort of cosmic, music of the spheres, to use a later term, but that the divine hierarchy from the top to the bottom that is along certain kinds of rhythmic or vibrational frequencies. What I think is interesting, I like the idea of trying to contact the same entity more than once in a drug fugue. But what I think is interesting is how whole universes seem to spring into being in that are different from one another when you are exposed to those substances. Because that, to me, that seems just as fascinating as the idea that there's this sort of order to it all, and if you just press the right buttons, you're going to get back to the same channel.
yeah.
But there's also an equally valid, from our perspective, limited perspective of humanity, possibility that it's like Rick and Morty's infinite cable, that there just literally is an infinite number of possible places to connect with. And so trying to connect with the same one over and over again, that's almost like marrying someone before you even have met them.
Yeah.
There's so many possible places to go with all this stuff. It's probably a good idea to realize that it is possible to somewhat control it. So where do you find out about that research with the sounds?
Oh, this is just people I know, mostly like little groups of psychonaut Freemasons who are, I'll try and get this one guy to come on it. He said he would at some point, but he's a very cool dude, an Australian living in America. And yeah, like, no matter how far you learn about a subject, whether it's entheogens or Enochian magic, man, there's always people that have like taken each one little thing or this little thing and gone way beyond, you know. It's amazing when we start to actually reach out and see what other people, serious practitioners of different disciplines, are doing in their pioneering work. I think we're at a very exciting time for developing new stuff.
I remember Joseph Campbell said something interesting on some documentary, that basically, his experience as a mythologist was, in some ways, he was left feeling a little bit left out sometimes, because the breadth of the things that he had explored and understood was huge, but he was constantly encountering people, like you mentioned, that had swam so much deeper than he could with what he was doing, that it was an interesting trade-off for him. And I don't think he regretted the path that he went down in his life at all, but it's an interesting thing to think about, that some of us tend to be people who just want to sort of like you said, experiment with 100 different ways of doing something. And there are some people who really just want to like stay with one particular thing. They're going to explore the 7 sacred vowels their whole life, and they're going to be their whole path. Or yoga, that's just all they're going to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly a fan of specialization. I mean, it's like, whatever disparities of perspective aside between me and John King, his work is fascinating because he's clearly gone all into certain things and explored very sincerely. And so that's fascinating to read. Like reading Ashen Chassan is fascinating because he's explored the Trithemian method more than anyone else, probably maybe ever in history. So these expertises are always going to be fascinating. But the thing about people who gain a high expertise in one thing is they tend to gain it in multiple things anyways, because they're just pretty high functioning people. So Ashen Chassan's a great grimoire magician, and also he's a ninja who can kick your butt.
I know, that's why I never cast aspersions upon him.
Never. We would not mock the Ashy Chassis. He would cast a demon.
Because we know we're going to get our asses kicked.
Yeah, I'd rather Crowley send a million demons at me than Ashen Chassan think one negative thought about me.
That should be on a t-shirt.
That would be that would be an extra large.
It's long for a t-shirt. Maybe it could be two-sided. Maybe a mug for contemplating.
I'll make one for you if you interview him and wear it. Yeah,
I don't know why I haven't contacted him. I guess it's because I haven't contacted anyone. Well, I've talked to Aaron because we both live here in Florida, but I sort of already did that stuff with them. And even though Josh was part of the other one, he was sort of like a cat doing his own thing. Like he really didn't interact with anyone else. He just kind of came on and did his thing and went away. I don't think he watched anybody else's even a tiny bit, but so I still wanted to interview him. I want to interview all 3 of the other people that were involved, all 4, S. Connolly as well.
No, it's a good thing. For those listening who don't know, your master class of Enochian Magic is it's a deep dive if you already know a lot, and it's a excellent survey if you don't know a lot, presented by masters from different perspectives. And I really enjoyed it when I did it just over a year ago when quarantine started. I did that and your Goetic one, and there's links to that on my site, you guys. So but yeah, no, excellent introduction. It would be really cool to hear you get into it more with Stenwick, and you've interviewed Aaron, right?
I haven't. I interviewed Carrie, his wife. I realized early on that I had only interviewed one woman, and I thought, and it's purely because of the people that I know. So like
Yeah.
I would reach out to all the people that I know, and I reached out to a bunch of women who said no because I didn't know them that well.
You
Then
white men.
you're right. No, and so I really made a conscious choice to try and, like, as much as possible, focus on getting female guests, because I didn't want it to be a monolithic male blob, fat white men laughing at each other or whatever. It seems strange to me. So yeah, and I've gotten to talk to some people who I might not otherwise have even considered talking to, who I thought were really, really interesting. So I think it was a good choice. And
Yeah, you're inside the Magic Circle podcast of video interviews is excellent. I'm so glad that you did that, and I hope you keep doing it. So yeah, there's a lot of good material coming out from good people, and that's really good. We need to counterbalance some of the wackos out there. Yeah, it's
I'm
like,
not sure what's the difference between the wackos and us. I don't really know.
like
I-
like telling people to like use demons to kill other people.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
those are wackos. If you're like encouraging people to kill other people with demons, I think you're a fucking wacko.
Who's doing that?
Oh, it's super popular. EA quetting, and I don't want to send any people other, but there's like there's lots of nut jobs out there, right? Or grifters or whatever you want to call them. I'm just more light
I'm
and
not that familiar with Quetting. I didn't realize that he was
you don't need
suggesting
to be.
homicide.
Yeah, he's just did a whole thing on how Enochian magic is, the black Enochian magic. It's all black. They're not really angels. They're black spirits. Rah. And it's like, it's not Christian at all. It's like, well, if you read the prayers, like one of my students really loves it because it's so Catholic. Like,
Right,
he's gonna go to seminary, and I was like, I thought you'd like this, and he's like, yeah, it's great. It's like, oh Jesus Lord. It's like having a great time, and the people who are the thelemic people can use Stenwick provides thelemic variants to the prayers and conjurations,
yeah.
which is wonderful, so that people who I made a slightly more GD version of mine, though barely made any changes because I like the original stuff as well. Yeah.
Well, it's funny when you talk about like mean black magic, because I spent the last several years studying the Greek magical papyri, amongst other sort of from that time period, philosophical stuff, and the there's a lot to not like about the Greek magical papyri, and I'm constantly finding myself feeling like, well, how can I make this less horrible than it is? Because there's a lot of sort of love spells that aren't really about love at all, and they're
Little rapey.
really mean-spirited. What's that?
Little rapey.
Well, they're not just rapey. I mean, there's rapey stuff in the Black Pullet. There's rapey stuff in I think in the Grimoire Virum, where it's sort of your intentions aren't that good with why you're trying to get someone to come to you, but it's also just, it's cruel. Like, first of all, you're like, there's a lot of stuff that's sort of cruel to the gods, where you're actually trying to like threaten or even punish the gods in a similar way to the way that goetic spirits end up getting punished in the further along conjurations in that book. But then also, like, a lot of the time you'll say things like, let Linda be tortured, unable to sleep, unable to think, unable to have the fire stop until she comes to me.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a lot of overkill to try and get laid. And it's interesting. I mean, but I mean, the truth of the matter is,
A little odd for a time where prostitution was de rigueur, like legal.
Well,
Maybe it wasn't always. I don't know.
I mean, well, I mean,
it seems like a lot of work,
the
Just
thing
go
is
pick
that
up a guitar and go sing at the beach.
you would probably be using it to reach upward,
Yes, of
rather
course.
than to try and get a prostitute. You would be trying to
Yeah,
get someone's wife, or trying to get, like,
a
or
rich young
someone's
girl.
husband. Yeah. So I mean, I can see the reasoning behind why you would, why, in certain situations you might think it was a good idea. Um, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of that stuff has really interesting qualities to it, which keeps me studying it. But I feel like my personal moral boundaries require me to look at it slightly differently than,
Hmm.
and I always think it's interesting. Like there's a bunch of sort of groups, and they rarely talk about the more unsavory things that go on in it. But it's just funny for me to think that these people, in their houses are reading about these, like, really really rough, mean ways of approaching things. And some of it's not just sexual stuff too. There's also sort of, controlling other people for other purposes,
Yeah.
that also can get into a meaner spirited thing. uh but I don't think that most of them are really mean spirited people. And again, that may just be because I am sort of hopelessly hopeful and naive towards people. But
Yeah.
it just seems funny to me. But I mean, like, there's so many things I really like about it. I really like the sort of like vowel formulas. I really like
Yeah.
a lot of
Me too.
the palindromic,
Yeah.
voces or barbarous names. I really feel drawn to those. And
Yeah. It
I
fits in really well with the whole Golden Dawn vibration thing.
it does. I mean, it fits in well with the whole Golden Dawn thing in general, which is a syncretic and Egyptian focused sort of thing. I mean, the Golden Dawn and the Greek magical papyri, like, fit rather nicely hand in glove, except for the fact that the Golden Dawn leads ultimately towards a highly Christian place. And there's a lot of Hebrew magical words in it. And there's a few Christian things here and there, but it's pretty
I would
non-Christian.
say
And
to I gotta clarify. I'd say the Golden Dawn leads to a highly hermetic place because that's what defines the sort of fusion of the Christian Egyptian Osiris Jesus thing, which really, if you look at the 5-6 initiation, it is a solid fusion. It's not one more than the other really at all.
I would agree with you that, and that's certainly, probably more and more true now, because of the fact that we are growing as a species, towards a more sort of, um, uh, syncretic, spiritual perspective on things. And so I mean, like, today's Golden Dawn, while I'm not involved in a second order of the Golden Dawn, um, it's going to have some people who have different beliefs, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
not,
you
but I
can be
mean,
whatever religion you want.
but the folks who were sort of promulgating it originally were coming from a Christian background.
They
And I
definitely
mean,
wanted to all push it in different directions. They all had agendas, which is why the original Golden Dawn gave rise to like 8 other orders.
right.
Yeah,
And
which
the
is good. Thank God it did.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who are sort of, particularly amongst the people I've interviewed, but in general in occultism, it seems like the Golden Dawn. First of all, the Golden Dawn gets sort of lumped in with Aleister Crowley, in a way that probably isn't fair.
Yeah, we love that.
Um, but I mean, the truth is, the Golden Dawn has taken the modern Golden Dawn movement has taken things from Crowley and brought them into the Golden Dawn. So, the doctrine of the true will and the holy guardian angel
No, the
were
whole
really
guardian
were
angel
really things
comes
that,
from Mathers and his translation of the manuscript.
but Mathers was calling it the divine genius previous to that translation. So, I
Right.
mean,
But it was Mathers translating the Abramelin that brought in the holy guardian angel, not Crowley.
no, I'm not I'm not suggesting that Crowley invented that term or even brought it into the Golden Dawn sphere, but he did make that a very, I mean, even the Golden Dawn stuff that's published, it focuses more on the divine genius, and yet in the
Yeah.
orders that I've encountered, the Holy Guardian Angel is used both synonymously and sometimes actually more so than the divine genius.
Yeah,
And
I guess in some of the more, because I've heard of a lot of very Thelema influenced orders. Alessandro, who I was just talking to at Frater VT, he was in a sort of a solo temple GD group that got a lot of cast offs from Homsey when that disintegrated years ago. But they were following, like, it sounded to me just like Golden Dawn, except Horus was the Hieros wasn't Horus, the Hieros was Set, and the Hierophant wasn't Osiris, the Hierophant was Horus. And to me that just turned my stomach, of course. But that is another good example of Crowley influencing Golden Dawn orders today, for sure, because
right.
they definitely consider themselves not Thelemic but Golden Dawn, but they were importing a religious attribute from the religion of Thelema that,
Right.
it's very distinct.
Yeah, and ill-fitting with the Golden Dawn as well. I mean, ill-fitting with that ritual, in fact.
Well, it
I
worked
mean,
for them, so they're, more power to them.
Sure. I mean, well, I mean, that's again, this gets back to what I was saying a lot earlier, which is that a lot of times things that that our ability to do magic has less to do with the text than it has to do with ourselves, right?
Exactly.
I mean, so you can make that work, but I mean the idea, I mean, Crowley's idea of Horus was that he was essentially removing the idea of death and rebirth from the whole thing at all. Instead, it was just the growth of a person to to manhood, which, I mean, that very idea, the more I'm exposed to other ideas, it seems like, I mean, I understand where he was coming from. He was trying to fuse together a bunch of stuff. Like, he was influenced by Nietzsche. He was there's so much going on in culturally at that time for him as a young man coming out of a crazy Christian, childhood and stuff. Like, I understand where he's coming from to a large extent, and I think that there were a lot of good ideas in there, in many ways. But I don't know that.
Fascinating guy for sure, fascinating magician, and put together a lot of interesting stuff. His experiments with hashish and other drugs that he documented, even the amounts and proportions, are very, very interesting. He really should get more credit for exploring entheogens in magic and in ritual.
Sure.
Fundamentally, I think the problem with him is he never understood the Golden Dawn. He never went through it completely. He never really captured the fundamental paradigm or mentality and the basic core mysteries that explain what it is. To me, he really is easiest to understand when I think of the grade that he left at and what experiences he didn't have. And then I can really make sense of how he went from there and how he developed his religion and his idea of the true will usurping the other expressions of that same sort of higher self. He makes sense to me. That's why I like him, is because he does make sense. As much as we, none of us fully would have done what he did.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that strikes me, and this is another thing that I think has been drawn into the Golden Dawn from Crowley to a certain extent, although not exactly, was that his experience of the Golden Dawn was that basically the order was telling him not to do a bunch of magical things, and he was wanting to, and so when he was exposed to what's his name,
Bennett.
Bennett, but Vivekananda was a big name at that time, spreading Raja Yoga and these ideas of different forms of mystical discipline that seemed to have a corollary to him with magic. And so, I mean, he was wanting to, and you're right, Bennett sort of exposed him to a lot of second order sort of practical work, and they played around with it. He was wanting.
Got a lot out of that. He got a lot out of the Golden Dawn magic, for sure. I mean, I don't think there's any denying he found his true will, and he was called to be a prophet and saint for a new religion. And look what his influence has been just culturally. It's phenomenal, right? It's on par, if not even superior in pop culture to WB Yeats, who definitely had a better impact health-wise on the world and global development, but Crowley was the rock star.
Right. I mean, Crowley was, the Rolling Stones to
Are we calling
Yeats'
Yates the
Beatles.
Beatles?
Yeah.
Happy birthday, motherfucker. In the future, we equate you with the Beatles. Well, why not? I mean, hey, as long I'm thinking more within you, without me, Beatles than like the Taxman.
Okay, sure. Or Love, Love Me Do.
Then Love, Love Me Do. Come give me a deine Hand when they sang in German. Oh my God. So peinlich. Oh my God. Yeah, it's Yates' birthday on Sunday. I'm doing a little Zoom party. You should stop by and give a toast.
On Sunday? Yeah, I might be able to do that.
You just stop in, read a poem, give a toast, hang out if you want.
What time?
2 to 5 Pacific time.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that's much later than mine. Yeah, I'm not sure because I, like school ends this Friday, so I'm not sure what I'm going to be dragged into in terms of entertaining children with no boundary of saying you got to go to bed.
Yeah, it's hard now that you're raising a singer-songwriter.
Yeah, I mean,
right. I can imagine she's like, Dad, I just got inspired. Fuck off.
She's really interesting. She reminds me of myself a lot. But yeah. she's much more gifted than I ever was in a lot of things that she's trying to do right now.
Well, she's got a cool dad. She's very lucky. Yeah, if we could, I think a lot of us, it would have been cool to have you as a dad, man.
I'm sure when she writes her memoir, you might feel it.
Yeah, but it won't be boring.
All things being equal, yes. I mean, certainly, like, she's given a free range to do what she wants, and to the limits of my abilities, I materially support her in her dreams and ambitions, because obviously, that's what we're here for, right? Is to.
You'd think, yeah. So, it's lucky to have that. Like, that's an awesome quality. I mean, fucking, we definitely did not all have that in our dads, man. So it's like,
no, I mean, I didn't. I mean, I didn't have it from either of my parents. But
your parents didn't give you your first Nemes and Red Sox.
Truth to be told, my mom is an artist herself. She's a musician, and so she was very in support of me being interested in the arts, which I always have been. I draw and I paint and I play some music, and I've written plays, and I made a movie, and so I mean, I've definitely had a lot of art stuff, but for sure my interest in alternative spirituality and magic has been a mystery to them, to my whole family. And so which is funny, because like my cradle, when I was born, my father was a carpenter, and so he made this like really mystical cradle for me. It's got in an act of youthful anger, unfortunately, I pulled it to pieces, but I still have some pieces of it. But he basically made these like stained glass things. So on the top, there's a sun. On the back, there's this glyph that his lover that he ended up leaving my mom for designed. But it's like it's a sunrise, and it's got a lion in it because I was a Leo. And then on the two sides, it's got a Capricorn and a Virgo, because that's my parents' sign. So it was like this entirely magical cradle that I that I spent my first several months in. But they weren't other than that was probably a product of the hippie times that they were in more than anything else.
Yeah,
but other than that,
I forgot that your dad was a carpenter. Yeah, I had that stuff too. My dad was a carpenter and like made my mom a bed that was like suspended on chains at each corner 2 feet off the floor, that like rocked and stuff, and built us all kinds of cool stuff. It is pretty cool. That sounds like an awesome cradle. Yeah.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
At Capella University, you're in control of your education. With the game-changing FlexPath format, You can set your own deadlines and move at your own pace. The faster you move, the more you save. Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Your AC works overtime all summer, so be sure to replace your old air filters with new Filtry air filters. They recommend updating HVAC filters at least every 3 months all year round. So order your Filtry air filters today at Filtry.com. Let's clear the air.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. During our summer sale, save up to $500 on select Sleep Number 360 Smart Beds, plus special financing, only for a limited time. Special financing subject to credit approval. Minimum monthly payments required. See store for details.
While we cannot control whether any ads get put in the spots allocated, we thank you for listening to those that do, since they help keep this project alive. You can also get ad-free content and bonus content and videos and a private webpage by subscribing exclusively to MAGICwithoutFears.com for only a couple dollars a week, or $6 a month, or $50 for the year. It helps a lot, plus you get emails about other exclusive things. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, but then, he left on us too, so.
Yeah, they're so creative. They're too creative to stick around and actually, be part of your life. No.
Right.
Yeah, mine's still like that.
My dad has, he married a woman who is, I think she's 15 or 16 years older than me. And so he has a daughter who I think she just turned 18 this year. So, and I'm almost 50. So, he was with her whole life, and super into everything that she's done, and, really supported her in her various endeavors and so forth. And it's really, and he likes to interact with me about it all. And I'm like, I'm really glad for her. This is probably a little bit of a funny area for us to be in, since you really weren't a part of my life until I was an adult. Yeah, so he's redeemed himself in his world, and so he's okay.
Fathers, man. God damn.
Now because he was a woodworker, now he makes ukuleles. He lives in Hawaii and makes ukuleles.
Oh, wow.
At least that's the legend. I'm sure he's made a few, but I don't know whether he's super productive with ukulele making. That's just something that he did a few times and says it as a thing. Yeah. He's an extremely gifted woodworker. And actually,
my dad's crazy. Isn't that interesting? That's so interesting. My dad's level of creativity, he makes stuff that other master woodworkers we don't understand his level of creativity. They've taken me aside and said that to me my whole life, and it's I don't understand. I'm not a woodworker.
Yeah, right.
I can do a hell of a lot more than most people. I can work on houses and shit like that. I did lathing for years with him, standing on scaffolding, putting up the black paper with the mesh wire over top so that it can be stuck out. Did that for years. Then I can carve and do a bunch of cool stuff. So I'm grateful for those skills. I definitely understand how it works, and that's pretty cool. But I just couldn't do what my dad did. Plus he didn't really encourage me to do it anyway. Well, he never encouraged me to do much. So, well, it's complicated. I talked a bit about it on my buddy Sean's podcast, the LVX Files, which is awesome because he's like X Files, but LVX Files. You should do his podcast because he's awesome and insane. He makes you tell your whole spiritual biography. He if he'll be okay, where were we? Were we at high school or were we still in grade school? And you have to go back and do it. And I think that would be fascinating because I'd love to hear sequentially more about your life. That would be fascinating.
It would be my pleasure.
Yeah, you should.
I feel like I've told my story a boringly large number of times, but I guess there's always more. You can get more and more granular.
Well, he's a fabulous sort of guy. He's a big OBOD guy, but also very into GD. And he's the guy I interviewed who who told me when I said I didn't know, I hadn't tried out your 60-day adepthood challenge. He's the one who said, "Oh, you have to." He said also, he's the one who said that if there is a way to self-initiate adepthood, then his 60-day thing is the tool. And which I was like,
Well, I mean,
shit,
I
that's
honestly, I from the beginning, I have tried to make it clear that really what I was attempting to encompass in that was not having the person become an adept. I don't think that's a fair thing to promise or
yeah, right?
to
Totally.
to
That's why
what
it's
what
so shocking. I was like, whoa.
that course is a fantastic course, and it's one. I mean, like I've made a number of things that I'm super proud of at this point, but that's definitely one of them. And what that course was really designed to do was to sort of make it so that the knowledge of a Golden Dawn adept of a Golden Dawn, the outer order person that you're supposed to have is both largely in your consciousness, that you can utilize at any time, because you basically build a sort of a magical memory palace. It's not quite like other memory palaces, because it's not based on a real place. It's based on an imagined place, and there are some memory systems that utilize that, but I keep it simple enough that it's pretty easy to manage. And so basically, sort of like all the correspondences of the Tree of Life, the astrology, planetary relationships in astrology, the geomancy, the tarot. You sort of build out an inner world that's filled with all of those things, so that you can know them, but also so that you can connect with them from that space as well. So in that sense, you could say that you're adjacent to adepthood, because I mean in everything that I try and do, I try and encourage people to really put themselves into it. Like I think one of the problems with the imagination and visualization in modern occultism is that people don't really do it very well, and so they don't see the benefit of it. In order to like extract all of the wonder of a visualization practice, you really have to immerse yourself in it with all of your senses, so that you are experiencing it at a level that it impacts you. If you're just sort of wandering around in daydream land, that's not really doing it at all.
Well,
And
that's what we're sort of
go ahead.
the power of groups and working with other people, helping push you forward by creating focused environments, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, and also learning from others. But
Yeah.
again, that you're only learning as well as the person who's ahead of you, which is actually other than the fact that maybe he didn't understand totally. I think one of the real problems with the AA system. And again, I don't really want to cast aspersions on people, because there are lots of people who I like who are involved in that.
Yeah.
But one of the big problems is that you're basically in that system, you have one person who you're dealing with. You aren't dealing with an order. You're dealing with one person, and if that person's not that great, your whole experience is ruined.
And that's mostly what I've met, is I've encountered people who, say that they are doing something that was the evolution beyond the GD, but they don't know even Hebrew letters. So it's like, how can you even do this stuff? It's very easy for a single teacher for things to slip through the cracks, knowledge-wise or priority-wise. And when you're in a magical working group or a temple environment, you have a lot of different people who will help catch those gaps in your knowledge base or practice base. And especially having different teachers who are good at different things, who like really take you into astral stuff in a whole new way. Like I'm excited for Drew Cooper, very greatly honored Frater Amon Ra, who was initiated through the grades up to 7-4, like full ceremony. Not many people do that anymore, right? Through Frater Yeshu's temple, and he's going to give us some.
Hey, I don't know if it's because something's changed in your environment, but I can't hear you as well. So. Uh,
Oh, am I clear again?
maybe.
Um, before it's getting late. We probably have to wrap up soon. But hey, before we
Yeah, that's good.
so much, so I am gonna finally. There's been delays and reasons for those delays in both your and my life. But finally, I'm gonna get through with my people who are doing it with me. The Grimoire 30-day Grimoire course you have. And so this is a chance for anyone else who wants to do that with us. We'll do a Zoom get together and chat, like just studying, keeping up, talking about what we've been through each day in your lessons at the end of each week. But
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't have a I don't have a Facebook group set up for that, but maybe I should create one, and we can,
yeah,
talk a bit,
who's bought
and
that?
I mean, there's sort of, I'm really having trouble hearing you for some reason, but there's sort of uh, a rolling,
Oh, I'm plugged up. Make it
there's
better.
there's people at various phases in it, and there's people who have sort of stopped moving forward in it. But so I mean, that might help them to get there. I
Can you hear
mean,
me better now?
oh yeah, you're perfect now.
Okay, yeah, I just unplugged the headset. For some reason, it was conking out, I guess.
So yeah, I mean, that course is it basically it takes you through a sort of a 10-step ritual formula that I think at this point I've even refined. I've removed a couple of steps, not that they aren't necessary, but they're just sort of like they're so connected with another step that I've shrunk the model down. But the 10-step model still totally applies. But it sort of shows that that's what's going on in all grimoires and ultimately all magical ritual. And then it begins to give you in each day of the course, which you don't have to do in 30 days, but it loads over 30 days. You're given a sort of
at the end of each week, we've all done the same classes and that sort of thing.
right, but it gives you a bunch of meditations or exercises to do in sort of connecting with various magical powers, energies, so forth, with some specific processes involved. And I have the feeling you won't have any problem doing those exercises at all, and probably most of the people who won't either. But it really sort of it keys you into sort of a quick way of getting into a visionary state that I think, I mean, it seems to be missing from a lot of people who are approaching grimoire magic. But so I mean, like, I think the Golden Dawn Adept is probably somewhat in a better position than some others, just because of the fact that they've spent so much time developing their inner space, so that it's a more natural thing. The difference between when I'm visualizing something, when I'm intentionally creating something, and when I'm in a visionary state, though, is that the visionary state is more just a receptive state. I mean, you can put something out in order to kind of create that vibrational state, like the DMT people who play the particular tone to get back to the same place.
That's sort of similar, like us intoning or chanting or vibrating a name of the spirit we're trying to contact.
I mean, that's exactly the same thing, and
Right?
the tone is the same thing. It's all one thing, which is that essentially we're trying to create a connection with something that is represented in whatever it is, but that is ultimately beyond whatever our symbol that we're using for it is.
I really like how Scott Stenwick describes it.
How's that?
Oh, well, just, he focuses on the tuning in with the frequency and also the sort of the spirit and the being, especially as we put these different letter and number combinations together to sort of, I don't mean manufacture, but evoke in a manufacturing sort of way. It's almost like we're drawing these strands from the fabric of reality. We're picking which strands and which letters that form that entity, and that entity is part of the dispersed oneness, the universal Aleph that is always Aleph, right? but when we evoke it or bring it towards us in any way, we're tuning ourselves to it, but also attracting it by sympathy, you could say, if not by divine command, you know. Yeah, I just like his sort of take on things. He has a background in neurocognitive stuff and all of that sort of fancy dancy stuff that, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely an interesting thinker and an interesting practitioner on these subjects in general. I
On
don't
your
know that.
Enochian masterclass, he was my least favorite, and I wrote some harsh notes about him in my diary at the time. But then once I started talking to him, and when I read his books, I was just like, oh, this dude's fucking awesome.
Well, he unfortunately, there were two things that were unfortunate about his presentation. One, his lighting setup that he did for himself was awful almost every single day. You know, he looked weird, and then his vocal tonality is a little bit odd. So putting those two things together, it's kind of easy to dismiss him. But you're right. I mean, what he said and what he says in his writing is very interesting and valuable. And I've had more than one person say, you know, that was the problem with that. You know, Aaron was, you know, gave us a lot of information and you gave us a lot of encouragement, but Scott was weird. And I'm like, just listen to him. Stop paying attention to, you know, his environment and listen to what he's actually communicating.
I loved the environment, and I wasn't thrown off by his presentation at all. But some of the way he communicates some of the information rubbed me the wrong way. But as I got to I question him. I've talked to him a lot since then, and you know, sometimes I wake up and he's the first person I send a message to. I'm like, hey, what about this? And he gives me really wonderful answers, and we get into it, and it's, yeah. So he's a very dynamic thinker, though. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a great course. People should take it. It's like a great deal for a 1 week, 7 day, 3 different perspectives sort of model.
Yeah. And I don't even know what the cost of it is anymore, but I don't think it's all that expensive for that. And it doesn't, you know, what's, how much is it?
I think it's $100 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something like 25 hours of recording. So I mean,
awesome. And the Goetia one with Ashen Chassan and yeah,
I think that one's almost 40 hours.
I think. And even Harper Feist does a whole chunk in that on communicating.
Oh right, yeah. Which
is great. It was really nice to get an introduction to her, and I've become very interested in her thoughts and work since then. Yeah, very cool lady.
So I have a question for you before I let you go. I know it's late and we both need to go to bed, or I need to go to bed. And you need to do whatever you do until it becomes,
I like bed. It's late for me. It's 10 o'clock.
It's 1. Yeah, it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
But I've grown used to staying up late because I have to have some time when I don't have the children around to get things done.
Very nice.
So you are the thing that I've gotten done tonight. But I'm curious about Nineveh Shadrach. You've brought him up a number of times, and first of all, I didn't realize. What's that?
What a guy.
I only became familiar with him with the book MAGICk That Works, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Which, like, I didn't realize that there was a Golden Dawn adepthood previous to that.
Yeah. He was like Zink's adopted son.
How did he shift to Arabic magic? So
he's Arabic.
Yes, but he was a Golden Dawn adept. So like what you know,
he left.
It seems.
Sorry, you finish. You finish. Sorry. Continue.
My question is, like, at what point did Golden Dawn cease being interesting, and then that became sort of the thing? And were you involved with that transformation? Were you like, hey, you're not going to come to you're not going to come to temple tonight? No, I'm talking to the Jinn. Was that?
When he left, I was on study abroad in the Waldorf School in Vienna in '97. When he left, when they changed from temple, when he finally he had to train. He couldn't really in good conscience leave, I think, without having trained 2 adepts to take his place, thus turning the sanctuary into a full operating temple. So he did that, and he's a remarkable magician, really, really, really. And of course, he was very honored Frater Ka, and he was the first person I met, and I orientated me, and then I had to come back, and my mom was orientated, went through had to meet him and sign a waiver because I was 15, and he pushed hard for me, very hard and it took several months from summer to November for me to finally get initiated. And there was definitely learned years later about quite the hullabaloo down in LA about debates. Like, it was debated, I was talked about, and they did work to decide what I should be joined, right? But he gave me the motto RC, Rompens Katane, the broken of chains, and he was my initial teacher because I wasn't allowed into group classes because I was 16, right? And I was 15. It was better to wait till I was 16. At least that in Canada is the age of consent. So if anything kinky or creepy happened to me, then at least it wouldn't be a felony, right? But they kept me away from some people. Other great magicians actually came from that temple, like Athena of Enochian.org. She was part of it in those early days, and she and Nineveh Shadrach did a lot of ritual working together with Babylonian gods like Ishtar and stuff. And eventually, my understanding is, because again, I was so new, I didn't get as much of the training. I got the training more from the 2 main adepts he trained, Bjorn and Marcel, and they were then my main teachers and for most of my time. But they were very well trained by him, and he left due to a conflict with, of course, he who must not be named, around the Arabic stuff, is my understanding. That he wanted to get more and more into studying that and practicing with Ishtar and Arabic jinns, because again, he can translate the grimoires from Arabic, and what a fabulous thing to be able to do. I mean, if you and me spoke and read fluent Arabic, right, we'd be doing some stuff with it, right? For sure. For sure. If we just woke up tomorrow knowing Arabic, he's like, yeah, it's a fascinating area of magic that's completely closed off if you don't speak it and can't read the things. And he's done a lot to open that stuff up. And then he was off my radar for good. Though years later, I know Martin was doing some sort of sneaking missions out to his house to listen outside his window for He Who Must Not Be Named, and that, but that never had anything. No one knew about that really. I think who knows what those kids got up to. I mean, again, it's the upside of a large group is if you're not involved in any sketchy shit, then it never doesn't really affect you that much. You're too busy with grade work and passing tests and doing all the good stuff. If you want to go be part of gossip and shenanigans, you're always going to find people to get up to that stuff with you. But yeah, so that he came from that world, and yeah, I don't know too much about what he's done. Alessandro, who I just interviewed before you the other day, Frater VT, he actually did some of his courses online, and I know a lot of people had. He and I have never crossed paths. Last time we ever communicated, I was 15. So yeah, short of being forced by him to do 3-hour-long middle pillars while he played Flight Commander downstairs was almost the extent of my experience with him. But he was ever alive in my mind because he trained the adepts who ran Tahuti and helped build it up, that then trained me, and so that we were all from that school. And that's why I think we had such a kick-ass temple, because it was founded by a kick-ass dude who did kick-ass ritual work and really took the work seriously, and that's what you need in a good group.
What I guess I my exposure to it was someone, as is with most magic stuff that I discover, someone who I know says, hey, have you heard about this? I go and check it out, and so I read the Magic That Works book, and it struck me that magic that works was casting aspersions upon Wicca, Golden Dawn, Goetic, or like anything other than that. It seemed like that was where it was coming from, and I think there's just, to a certain extent, there's a little bit of that sort of polemic in the book. But now that I know that he was actually a high up Golden Dawn person, it seems even stranger. Especially now that you're saying that he did wonderful magical work that transformed both you and the lives of other people. And so why is it that, I mean, the title "Magic That Works" seems kind of like a challenge, like this is magic that works, and other magic is magic that doesn't work. So how do you? I mean, is there a sense within the people who are underneath him that he, sort of switched teams, or is that not even the way that you guys are thinking?
Yeah, I wouldn't know, because I never read his books, or he had a lot of respect for the craft when I joined, because that's where I was coming from. I was like, I'm just getting into, tried to use Don Craig's book to self-initiate it. I failed spectacularly, like got full like spiritually attacked on a midsummer by something that sort of paralyzed me, and I was like on the ground. It was shocking because I don't really go in for that sort of thing, like, oh, I can see a spirit, it's coming toward, that's just not, sure, stuff like that happens, but it's not, I'm not looking for it. I tend to ignore that stuff unless it's so strong, if I can't not ignore it, if it forces my attention, unless I'm, of course, unless it's in my field of intention of the thing I'm trying to focus on. But if you're trying to like use Don Craig's book to self-initiate as an Adeptus Minor after working through the first part of the book for 6 months, and while you're taking the vow, all of a sudden, like, you become physically overwhelmed, and your friends see something, pointing arms at you, and you can't move, and you're like in shock. That's weird. That's fucking weird. It's one of the very few weird experiences, sort of phenomenal experiences I've had, you could say. Phenomenal is probably the right word for that. The last thing was at Chris Bennett's recently during quarantine.
I don't know if you are I would think you would be privy to young magicians who are just coming into occultism in general, or sort of like a magical training thing. But I actually found that there were probably about 20% of people, at least early on, who were coming into my new Hermetic stuff, which isn't really a magical school at all, but people treated it like it was.
Yeah.
But about 20% of them would have sort of like a weird demonic poltergeist experience, and they would say to me, "Jason, I'm not sure if I should continue doing this ritual that as you've written it, because I'm having all these crazy demonic experiences." And I would say, well, you're not the only person who's had that experience.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Yeah, but that's kind of the premise of what we're doing is so not everybody has it. You should probably be grateful because you had an experience that a lot of people would like. That would, about 50% of those people would freak out and disappear after that. But so I don't think that's that strange. What is very strange though is while you were saying it, you obviously evoked something, because I had a super loud tinnitus on my left ear right as you were talking about it, and then it passed away as soon as you stopped talking about it. So
it's crazy. I'll send you the pictures of that diary entry sometime from 1994 or 95 or whatever it was, because you probably find it interesting.
I would love to see it.
It's weird, especially you're so young. It's so interesting to look back at our old diaries. That's why people really should keep them. They're fascinating at any point.
Yeah, I've got a whole box of them somewhere. I actually I had an encounter with a spirit that scared me quite a lot, especially because there was this sort of like rumor of a magical war that was going on between the group I was pretty new in and this one guy who I don't think that he was really capable of doing that sort of a thing in retrospect, but it was nerve-wracking. And then I had a pretty weird spiritual encounter, which interesting. I tried to combat with a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, and that seemed to amuse it more than accomplish.
Yeah, well, strictly GD teaching usually says like, the LRP and LRHs are not going to do much to things outside of you. That's where you get into more supremes, right? But that's just the theology.
Well, and when a random being is sort of interacting with you as you're walking in the woods, you don't really know what pentagram or hexagram to dispel it with, because it's just sort of a thing, So, but anyway, the thing about Nineveh Shadrach, it's odd to me because, like I could totally picture having a revelation and just completely switching my belief system when I was 18 or something like that. But it seems odd to be like the head of a temple and then completely just sort of transform into something else. But I mean, it's good. Obviously, he's following what his real vision for his life is. It's great.
Yeah. He did an interesting podcast with Edward on Esoteric Nerd podcast years ago that is worth listening to. Yeah. He's there on the Esoteric Nerd podcast under either he's listed as Nineveh Shadrach or VH Frater Ka. Yeah.
But I wonder if he'd let me interview him for Inside the Magic Circle.
I really think it would be interesting. I'd be curious to know what he's up to. I mean, he's very active, training and teaching people and doing whatever he's doing. So I hear, I don't know. It's like, again, we're all doing our own thing.
Sure. I mean, yeah.
I don't have much of a connection with Arabic or jinn stuff, as fascinating as it is. Yeah. But I'm glad he's doing it. Just like I'm glad you're doing all this PGM stuff, making all these tools that people can get, and all these people like Jack Rail are putting out courses, because when I am ready to explore the PGM, I look forward to having a lot of groundwork already laid that I can enjoy, just like is the case with Enochian magic over the last sort of 10, 12 years. A lot of really great stuff's come out, and it's just making the whole experience a lot more enjoyable. The purest
absolutely
stock material, as opposed to how it was in the 90s, man.
Sure. It was Gerald Schuler.
Yeah, they were like disappointing.
Gerald and Betty.
Yeah, it was disappointing stuff, man.
So I mean, and the thing about the PGM that's interesting, as opposed to almost anything else, other than maybe like the Nag Hammadi library or something like that, is that it's not a singular teaching at all. It's not. There's no sense of like, oh, here's the through line in this. It's all just it's someone who was either doing ethnographic research or they were a practitioner who just liked to put their finger in a bunch of pies. But it's all written by different people and over who knows how long of a time period, and it doesn't have a single. There's no such thing as PGM magic, strictly speaking, because it's not one thing. It's a bunch of people. There's a bunch of stuff that's all been thrown together. Now there's a lot of sort of themes in it once you sort of look at it for a while. But the other thing that's interesting about it is that there's this huge collection of magical gems, and there are probably maybe 6 magical gems discussed in the Greek Magical Papyri, and then there's another 36 magical gems discussed in a book called Hermes to Asclepius, of which there are a few. There's one example of one of the gems from the PGM actually seeming to have been made by somebody, and then there's a few. There's a number of things that are probably either attempts at it or variations on the theme, and the Hermes to Asclepius, same thing. There's a few things that seem like they're probably related to it, but for the most part, those literary things don't seem to really match up with what people were doing. So what that suggests is that the collection that we have is a tiny fraction of what was actually out there being worked with. There are a ton of gems that are quite similar to each other. So there's clearly like a pattern to them. Like there's a one particular version of like a snake with a lion head with the word pepte, which is stomach in Greek. And so, I mean, that was clearly a talisman to, help to be a magical Pepto-Bismol from the past. And there's tons of them. They're, all very similar to one another, but that's not mentioned in the PGM anywhere or anything like that. And as far as I know, I don't think it's mentioned in any of the magical medical stuff that we have either. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we just don't have. We have this thin little band of what wasn't destroyed by the crazies.
I think we're going to get a lot more manuscript dumps in our lifetime.
It's possible.
I've got my sights set on a Kabbalistic manuscript that's never been translated, and I really want to translate it. I think I found another translator to do it with me, and it's really exciting, because no one's done it, and there's the majority of stuff still is not available.
Certainly Kabbalah, there's a huge amount of stuff that, and frankly, Germanic, French, and Italian magic, there's got to be a ton of it that we've never seen, that just because as English,
the primary magical and religious texts of Zoroastrianism have never been translated.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, but that's a huge some of those things, they're so specialized. I mean, it's like
I'm talking about the main texts, like their fundamental texts we can't read.
Right, but I mean, have you ever tried to read a translation of like the Rig Veda, the ancient Indian stuff? I mean, it's not exactly inviting reading, and frankly, I doubt. I'm sure there are scholars who think they know what it's all about, but I doubt that, in the same way that we don't really understand some of the stuff that's going on in the Greek magical papyri or even ancient philosophy, really, we don't understand. I don't know that we could really even, because, okay, if you we got to stop this conversation.
Yeah, I know.
I could talk till the end of time.
Hey, did you hear Stephen Skinner on Glitch Bottle say that if you're looking for Egyptian magic in the Greek magical papyrus, you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel? I thought that was so awesome, because we all know what he's saying. It's like, yes, it is a collection of different things, but the way he said it was so awesome.
Well, I mean, he's right, because it's really not Egyptian magic at all. It's more Greek magic, if anything, and really just a sort of a bouillabaisse of whatever was going on then. I mean, it's actually amazing if you think about it and you consider that EIO is really a transliteration of a Hebrew term. How much Jewish magic is in the Greek magical papyri? I mean, Sabaoth and EIO are two of the most frequently occurring voces in the whole thing. So
they probably learned that during the Jewish initiates. Probably learned that when they were from their time, when they were initiates in Assyria. They probably adapted it from the Assyrian tradition.
I mean, sure. I mean, placing the origin of these things would be absolutely impossible. But yeah, I mean, the thing I was trying to say though is that like it's an eclectic thing at a level that's really kind of hard to even process, because there's so much different stuff in there. I mean, it gives the impression that basically magicians of the past were not all that different from magicians of today, in that they were like looking for the ingredient, the special thing that was going to really make it zing. And so they kind of just threw every possible magical formula or name that they could come up with into a lot of spells.
Yeah.
And so that's the takeaway from this whole conversation.
Yes.
Just be as eclectic and random as possible.
Yes, that is not our advice. That's what Ashen Jasan thinks is best. Be eclectic. Doesn't matter what metal you use. Just use paper. Use tinfoil. Doesn't matter.
I think Aaron Leach is in that same school. Aaron and Adley Nichols.
Yeah, I'm
honorable mention.
I've just cast.
What's that?
I've just cast 3 9-inch pure beeswax tablets ready for engraving. I have
Nice.
like, it's an adventure. Did you find a solution to the rippling on the one side? Or
It is
because you use a mixture, because you're not using beeswax, maybe it's different.
There's a significant portion of beeswax in my mix. I actually suspect personally, and I don't really know because I was never more than 4 feet away from them or so. But these materials in the British Museum do not seem like beeswax to me. I suspect that they're actually made of sealing wax of some kind or another. But
oh yeah, I just had a ton of beeswax lying around from Waldorf School. That's why.
No, but I mean, no. Any Enochian person worth their muster knows that beeswax is the only thing that you're supposed to use. But I do suspect that the ones that are in the British Museum are made out of something other than that. It's hard to say because it's hundreds of years old, so it might change the way it looks. But it seems to have a quality that reminds me of like when you see like a letter seal.
Yeah.
It somehow it seems that way to me, and I don't that was my instant impression when I saw it. Is like these aren't made out of the same thing that I've tried to make these things out of. But that experience of seeing them made me start making them. So I've been making Enochian seals for 24 or 25 years. I've probably made more Sigillum DMS than all the rest of the people who've ever made them in the entire history of the world.
Probably.
By a large factor. Because I used to sell them to Azure Green, and I would sell them by like 20 at a time to him every month or two. So I mean, I've just made
wow.
Yeah,
well, I'm
a lot.
definitely gonna get, like, for the 4 small ones, I definitely got to get your whole set because I don't want to make 4 little ones. That's too much.
It's very hard.
Yeah, I can tell.
I mean, and it's not too bad, but there's certain sort of the lettering is so small. There's a few places where that you kind of have to be a little bit charitable. It's not as bad as those pewter seals of the the Key of Solomon that you can find on the internet, where it's like it's just a little blob where the Hebrew letter would be. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yud.
You can definitively see every letter on it if you go around. But I mean, some of them are it's like it's pretty small. I guess that's where I've gotten into doing those my magical gem reproductions, is doing like sort of minute work. Yeah. So anyway,
yeah,
I feel it's super late here. Yeah.
I definitely have more things I want to talk to you about, but we'll have to do it again sometime. Let's not wait a year this time.
Yeah. Oh, it's been less than a year, but yeah, absolutely. It's fun to talk to you because I don't get to be interviewed that much, so I always have to like let people have their say and not interject too many of my own thoughts in it.
well, we'll definitely do a follow-up after we've gone through your 30-day grimoire course. People, go to hermeticmysteryschool.com and click through to join the grimoire 30-day thing, and you can do it with us if you want. It'll be a lot of fun, and we'll maybe Jason into one of our shindigs when we talk. And
just final thing on that subject. All my courses, they're really not about learning something new. I mean, you can just read the grimoires and do it, but they're about taking a practical approach towards putting your consciousness into the space in which you're going to succeed in those things at a level that I think that would take you a lot longer to get to if you didn't take the course. And I think that's really where their value lies, is in doing the things that and sometimes like I ask a lot of questions about what people are getting out of it, and very often they'll just say, yeah, that was relaxing, or I guess I saw something planetary there. And that's fine. You don't have to have had an amazing experience every single time, because that's the purpose of the course, is to kind of like push you into that liminal space, for want of a better word, to get into the place where you are connecting with those things, in a place where it doesn't matter, where it's easy, where it's not, there's no pressure upon you, so that when you're like ready to start, quote unquote, really doing it, you aren't coming into it with like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I'm ever doing a magical ritual and this feels weird. So I kind of like, I baby step you into it, and so if you have some experience in magic, it may seem like I'm being too simple at first, but it does develop more as it goes along, so that you are like a frog in the water, and all of a sudden, you're in a different place. So, and by that I mean the slowly heating of the frog. I don't know if that metaphor came through in what I just said, but anyway.
Yes, you're trying to slowly boil us into psychic and spiritual awakening,
right?
Like a frog.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Jason Augustus Newcomb, thanks for coming back on Magic Without Fears Hermetic podcast. You can find Jason
My pleasure.
JasonAugustusNewcomb.com, and he has lots of goodies there. There'll be links below for that, and doing his grimoire course with me and my friends, and also the Enochian course that we talked about. You can check that out. Yeah, let's don't be a stranger as always. I'm sure I'll talk to you soon, and give love to the family and your lovely wife, and of course also just share my love and condolences and everything, and best wishes.
Thank you. Yeah. He's beating around the bush, but my father-in-law died a couple months ago. So
yeah, we all took a few more than a minute for that for you, bro.
Yeah. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a wonderful night, Florida.
It's almost morning here.
Oh, damn. You're hardcore, you wizard. All right. Peace and love, bro.
Bye-bye.
Diving deep into the practices and reality tunnels of the esoteric and the occult, check out Praxis Behind the Obscure podcast, where I interview practicing occultists, do book reviews, and much more. Check us out on YouTube, Red Circle, and many other podcast platforms.